hook up the computers, which I'm very good at not doing that right. Um, and maybe there's a degree in that somewhere. Any rate, I just want to also remind you that there are handouts if you want them in the back for all the programs as well as today's. There's some notepads back there and pens or whatever. Anybody didn't get it and needs it, that our guest has provided. And we're going to try to do an entire spectrum of the decisions you make about the end. So if there's areas he doesn't cover and you'd like to have that discussed, please bring up those questions. He's ready for everything. You know, I've talked with Todd and personally been involved with him, and he's really, really good at what he does. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Todd Miller. He is a funeral director at Rumsey Yost here in Lawrence, and he will make his presentation and answer all your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate it. Jack made it sound a lot better than it is. So if you get bored halfway through, I apologize. You know, there's a restroom right outside the door. So no, I want you all to feel free to ask any questions you might have. This is one of those things that each family that comes into the funeral home is a little bit different than the next. So we want services to be as much about that person as possible. So any questions you might have that pertain to you, please ask, or even if it's a vague question, please ask. I do have several different papers in the back. One of them is preparing before death for you and your loved one. It's kind of a checklist that gets you thinking about different things to think about in a sense of trying to get things squared away before everything does happen. So feel free, if I don't have enough copies, just let me know. We can get those to you. That's not an issue at all. So that's my presentation for today. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it. So no, my name is Todd. My wife and I moved up here back in 2007 to become funeral directors. So both my wife and I went to school to become funeral directors. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, you have to go to school to do that? Yes, you in fact do. It's a 2-year degree over at Kansas City, Kansas Community College is the only college around here that does mortuary science. After you're finished with your 2-year degree, you take your national boards, which is the hardest test I've ever had to take in my life. How many times did I have to take it? No, I don't want to talk about that. Anyhow, no, I did pass my boards. Once you pass your boards, you go to whatever state you want to be licensed in, and you do a 1-year apprenticeship. After that 1-year apprenticeship, then you take your state boards, and then you're licensed, and then you just have to keep up on your continuing ed. So all in all, it's about 3.5 years worth of schooling and learning to become a funeral director. So we moved up here in 2007 and went to school, and our idea was to move back to Iola, which is where we're from. And our idea was to buy the funeral home there, and that didn't quite work out the way that we had planned. The funeral director there had gotten ill and wound up selling the funeral home. So we wound up staying here in Lawrence, and I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of happy we did. So it's a wonderful community to be in. I've got 2 young daughters that are special needs, and this community definitely has a lot more assets to their advantage. So thank you all for that. I appreciate everything that everyone does. So any questions about me that anyone else wants to ask? No personal questions? Okay, all right. Well, one of the things that I really enjoy about my job is when someone comes in, to me, I want to, in essence, get something put together that's a tribute to that person. And that's why I say that each service that we do is just a little bit different. We want to involve the family. We want to run with ideas, and we want to do something that's important to that person. When I started here at Rumsey Yost, I was 21 years old, And most folks would come in and they'd say, oh yeah, Dad used to catch catfish the size of Buick bumpers. And I'd look at them and I'd say, I've heard fish stories my whole life. I don't know what you're talking about. When they'd say catfish, we all knew what they were talking about. And so I gave these families a hard time until they brought in pictures. And sure enough, their dad was holding catfish up to their neck and they were dragging the ground. So to me, that was one of those ways that I could connect with that family. And ever since then, I've kind of been a little bit more open-minded about the stories that I'm told at the funeral home. And I believe just about everything that's told to me. I say just about, not everything. Anyhow, so when a family comes in and they're distraught and they're upset about what's going on, to me, it's finding a way to make them reminisce and do right by their parents. There are a lot of families that come in that, to be honest with you, they've never talked one day about what mom wanted. So when they come in and they say, oh yeah, mom used to say this, this, and this, that's what we run off of. We go with that. So I do applaud you all for being here today. It's not an easy task, but at the same time, you're not only helping yourselves out, but helping your families out in the future as well. So some of the things that I want to kind of go over, we do have information forms on the back table. These are specific for our funeral home. The front page is just statistical information that we would need to file for a death certificate. After that, it kind of walks you through the process of figuring out what you want as far as a service is concerned. Like I said, each person's a little bit different. Some folks have been in the military, some folks, haven't. So each service should be as unique as the person. But anyhow, it kind of gets you through the process of figuring out what you want to do in a vague sense. What you would do next is you would contact the funeral home of your choice and then set up what we call a pre-need or a pre-need arrangements, where we would sit down and hash out all the details that you might have and specifics that are just for you, so that when the time does come, there's no question about it for your family. Years ago, when I had just gotten out of school, one of my favorite stories to tell folks is I had a family come in. I had never met them before in my life. They came in, they sat down, and their mom had sat and did a pre-need before I was born. Okay, so the folder was an old folder that I had to acclimate because the newer folders are completely different than the old ones. But as I opened up the folder, there were 3 envelopes in there, and it had one of each of the kids' names on it, and they were sealed. And so I sat with the family and I said, now is so-and-so here? And they said, yeah, that's me. And so I handed out the envelopes. The lady had known her kids would need her the most at this moment. So she actually took the time to write out little notes about why she was proud of them and what she, loved the most about them at that time. So that was what they needed when we were sitting down doing arrangements. And I get goosebumps just thinking about it right now, but the idea that she took that much thought and effort into how she wanted her arrangements to go makes me excited more than anything. So after the kids read the message, we turned around and we sat down and did arrangements, but they reminisced about the good things. It didn't start off on a bad note. Mom had thought so much about us that she wanted us to be taken care of even at this time. So just something to think about as you move forward and as you sit down and talk to your funeral directors. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. That's what we're here for. It doesn't matter what funeral home you go to, just let them know this is what you would like to do and how you want to go about it. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm going to have to start calling folks out, I think. 3rd row back, 4th chair in. I'm just kidding. Okay, who here has capers? Does anyone have capers? All right. This is one of the things that I really enjoy talking to folks about because not everybody knows about it. When you retire and you have capers, there is a $4,000 death benefit. Okay. Now, businesses are taxed different than individuals. So if you are to designate a funeral home the beneficiary of your CAPERS death benefit, the full $4,000 comes to the funeral home and can be applied to your services. Now, anything over and above what the funeral home charges would go back to the family unless you're awarded the state. So, but if you were to not designate a funeral home, your CAPERS benefit, let's say you just have your son as the beneficiary, the state will tax it immediately. So instead of the full $4,000, you have $3,200 that will be put towards your funeral services. So one thing I like to tell folks with CAPERS that have retired is fill out this form and fax it in. It's very simple, but it lets the CAPERS people know that when you pass, that funeral home is going to take care of things. So any questions about that? Yes, wait for the mic. I know, I almost had you talk, I know. No, you're good.
I read somewhere that the death benefit is going up to $6,000
Oh.
July 1st.
Very nice.
I did my designation when I retired.
Uh-huh.
So do you have any idea whether I have to redo the form?
I think if you designate it at one point, it should carry over, but I would suggest contacting CAPERS directly. I mean, they know way more about this than I do. You know, it's one of those things. I am glad that they are upping that. That is fantastic for any Kansas employee. That's a phenomenal thing for sure. Any other questions or yes?
So if I register with one funeral home,
Mhm.
what happens if I change my mind?
And you can do that. That's not a problem. You simply have to contact CAPERS and then they'll walk you through the process of getting that taken care of. There's no issue with that at all. Yeah, you just call CAPERS. What's happened in the past, same thing with an insurance policy. Let's say you go to a funeral home and set everything up. And then later on you decide, oh, you know, I don't want to stay in Kansas. I want to move to Florida or something like that. Kansas is a 100% state, meaning anything that you prepay to a funeral, 100% of that has to go into an insurance policy or an irrevocable trust. And what that does is that saves you as the consumer. If you decide to move somewhere else, you still have that policy. You can transfer it to another funeral home, or you can contact the funeral or have your family contact the funeral home to take care of the arrangements. I mean, there's several options as far as that's concerned, for sure. And there was one other question right here. Oh, you got it. Okay, good. Oh, right over there.
I'm wanting to just be cremated
Sure.
and then not have a service at a funeral home, but rather at somebody's house or
Perfect.
somewhere. Would the funeral home be in charge of the cremation, or is that a separate thing?
So we actually, our funeral home is the only funeral home in Lawrence that has an on-site crematory. So we do everything in-house. There's no transferring to a different facility or anything like that. So we take care of everything. We file for Social Security. We notify Social Security. Now it's still up to the family to contact Social Security to figure out what benefits are involved and whatnot. But we do notify Social Security when we submit the death certificate to the state of Kansas. What we would do in the state of Kansas, you also have to have 3 forms of authorization before you can cremate. There are a lot of folks just are under the impression that we just cremate right away when we get them back to the funeral home. That's not the case. So in the state of Kansas, we have to have family authorization. We have to have the doctor's authorization, and we have to have coroner's authorization before cremation takes place. That's not anything that anyone has to worry about other than the funeral home. But when I sit down with a family, I'd like to explain the process of what we do and how we're doing it. So the family doesn't just think that we're not getting the authorization or just sitting around waiting. Really, it is a waiting game, but once we get the paperwork and get everything signed, we cremate immediately. Now, as far as what you just said, there are several options as far as whether or not the funeral home's involved. So one thing I'm going to tell stories about myself that it doesn't really reflect on anyone, but it kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. My mother is a very young person. And I told her at one time I wanted to be a funeral director. She was devastated, of course. She's like, "Oh, you're so good with the living. Why are you?" Anyhow, I said, "Mom, I'm still going to work with the living. I promise you, it's fine." Anyhow, we sat down one time after dinner and I said, "Mom, what do you want to do?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Mom, I have 4 younger sisters. We can't figure out what we're having for dinner, let alone what we're doing for Mom's funeral. What do you want to do?" And she said, "Well, I don't want a funeral." And I said, "Okay, what do you want?" And she said, "Well, I'm part of a club over at the Elks Lodge. I want to have a live band. I want to have 3 kegs of beer, and I want to have an awesome party." And I said, "Okay." So I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing things down. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing your arrangements." She said, "No, I don't want a funeral." I said, "You want a celebration of life. And that's something that I do." She's like, "You can handle all of this?" I said, "Absolutely." So after we were finished with that, I started asking her, "Do you want it potluck? Do you want it catered? Do you want this? Do you want that?" By the time we were finished, I kind of had an idea of what was going on. And she also had a better idea of what I do for a living. So funeral homes can be as involved or not at all. We are there to help out families. And if the family doesn't want us involved and they want to take a more active role in it, then absolutely. But at the same time, we can still do services that are more elaborate and not the standard. So anyhow, hopefully that answered that question. Yeah. Any other questions? I think you had a question, sir.
Isn't there a death benefit from Social Security too?
There is. So if you have a spouse or a child under the age of 18, Social Security will offer $255. I know. That's something that we talk about quite often at the funeral home. And it's if you have a spouse or child under the age of 18. I really wish that there was something else, but that's really all that entails. Now, while I said earlier, we do notify Social Security, but it's up to the family or the surviving spouse to reach out, and they'll be in contact with Social Security in order to get that death benefit.
Do you know if I heard that Social Security only pays that death benefit to the spouse once? So like my first husband died, I got it.
Right.
So if my second husband dies, I don't get any.
That I'm not 100% on.
Okay.
That is true. Okay. That I'm not 100% on that by any means. I probably should look into that a little bit more, but yes, this gentleman here said that is correct. So yeah, unfortunately, you're working with just the little that the state can throw out as far as that's concerned. Yes. Oh, she asked about a benefit. If your spouse passes and you collect that $255 and then you get remarried and you have another spouse, will you get the $255 from that? And that's not the case. And you, sir, I'd watch out for her. She's looking out for, I'm kidding. I actually know these folks. Yes, no, I know them, so I can give them a hard time. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Yes.
Does a funeral home have to be involved in the death certificate? I thought it could come just from a medical professional.
So there are only a couple things that the funeral home has to do. So the funeral home, we have to notify Social Security. And if there is any type of embalming or preservation of the body, that is what the funeral home has to take care of. Yes, your family can take care of the majority of it, but we file for the death certificate and get things squared away as far as that's concerned. We notify Social Security. Yes, go ahead.
Are you at all involved? How does the Neptune Society work? Do they?
So
notify you?
Neptune Society is a cremation society, and they're nationwide, basically. We have worked with several cremation societies in the past, but there are a lot of things that are variables, if that makes sense. So like for instance, when you're working with a Neptune Society, they don't own the crematory, they don't own any of the crematories that they're working with, what they do is they'll try to contact someone to see if they can get it for a certain amount. And that's kind of it's a odd thing to do, but years ago, the Neptune Society and other societies like that have come out to try to get folks to do a pre-need, and they go into it thinking that they got everything taken care of, and oftentimes it doesn't quite play out that way. So I'm not saying don't look into it. Definitely look into what works best for you, but in the past, like I said, I've heard stories galore about different families that didn't really have a nice outcome with what they thought they had. If that
I am a person who has the Neptune Society because I got it because of the military, because there's a pretty adequate discount for everything when you get it. And I got it years ago. So it's prepaid. They take care of all the arrangements, but every state's going to be a little different. A lot of that's going to happen behind the scenes, but you're guaranteed to have them pick up the body. You're guaranteed to have the cremation done and to have the remains either returned to you, and they give you a little box or whatever, returned to you, or buried at sea, which they do through the naval services. And it's your choice, if you have them returned to you, what you want to do, keep or dispose of the returns after that. So at that point, you might be involved with a funeral
Sure.
director, you might not. You might, do the Shawshank thing where my kids are going to go to Disney World and drop a little of me everywhere along Disney World. I don't know,
That's-
but
don't tell
it-
anyone that, Jeff.
yes, I know.
You're not-
But the bottom line for me was, it was being in the military at the time gave me a huge discount, and I bought it years ago. So
Right.
it was really pretty inexpensive. But we've learned through the experience of working with them on my wife's situation, which is different than mine, that every state is different and it always gets complicated. So you're always good to talk to somebody if you can.
I don't see a green burial on the list here.
It is on there, actually. So I have a general price list over on the other side. Anytime you go into any funeral home, if you walk up to someone and say, hey, give me a general price list, by law, they have to give you a general price list. So that gives you an idea of what to look for. Our price lists at the funeral home, I have them in the back. I can email them to you. However, I need to get the information to you is 100% up to you. But when you go into the funeral home, you ask them, give me a price list, and there should be information about direct burials. We call them direct burials or green burials. And I actually have several slides today. That was one of the things I was going to touch base on. We're having more and more families kind of get into the idea of doing what's called a green burial. Green burial, we're very lucky in Lawrence to have Oak Hill Cemetery. They have one of the very few open green sections that's open to anyone to purchase a grave space and go out. One of the things that sets them apart from any other part of the cemetery are the rules that are set in place. So if you're going to be buried in the green section, you are required to not be embalmed. Okay, so there is no embalming. What that would entail as far as the funeral home's concerned is we are limited on the amount of people that can come and view you, if that makes sense. So if we do an embalming at the funeral home, what that does is it disinfects and preserves the body as long as we need to in order to have a public viewing. So anyone can come in and pay their respects. If someone's going to be doing a green burial, we do a private family viewing where immediate family can come in and pay their respects. And then we go out in a very timely manner and get them out to the cemetery. The green section, so there's no embalming. The casket of choice casket or coffin has to be 99% biodegradable. Okay, so we have seaweed coffins at the funeral home, which doesn't sound very appealing at all. But if you look at it, it looks like a wicker chair, basically. But it's a wicker coffin. where we can get the person dressed, prepped, have a private viewing, and get them out to the cemetery for the burial. Out in the green section, you cannot have a polished granite headstone. It has to be a raw piece of granite, and then you can engrave your name on that. And then the family also has to take part in placing the person into the grave space and burying the person as well. So, I mean, there's several things that have to happen in order to get buried in the green section. So go ahead.
So I have a couple of things. First of all, just so people know, the green spaces are going fast.
Well,
Not very many left.
they actually ran out not too long ago. However, they signed on with the city and they expanded that section. So
Okay.
they have way more spaces than they did before.
Okay, because
So,
we kind of hurried to get ours when we found out.
yes.
But my question is something you just said,
Mhm.
that the family has to help with the actual burial. What if there's nobody around to do that?
They don't have to. It's kind of a requirement by the cemetery. So here,
Oh,
the logistics behind it, and forgive me, I'm going to say a few things that I hope not to offend anyone, and I'll be delicate about it. So the idea of placing someone in a grave space and then having a backhoe come in and fill in the grave space is kind of off-putting. So what they do in the green section is when you place the person in the green section, we ask the family go ahead and shovel the first bit into the grave space so that it at least covers the person. And then that way it's not an unpleasant experience, if that makes sense. You know, and if you think about it, this is how they did it before funeral homes came around. The family came from miles around, they had the wake, they would make the casket or coffin themselves, and then they would take the person out to the grave space and they would dig the grave and so on and so forth. We do have a lot more families that are wanting to do something like that, which is awesome to me. And even if cremation is going to be what you choose to do, that's still something that a lot more families are wanting to be more involved with. Meaning, we work with all the Hindu and Buddhist families that are local, and part of their services will take the person down after we do the embalming. We'll have the service. We actually will have the family will carry the casket down to the crematory and place the person into the crematory. While that doesn't sound appealing to some, it is something that's necessary for others. So we do offer that kind of service at the funeral home. If a family wants to be involved and help us place their loved one into the crematory, we can offer that. So there are several things that we do at the funeral home to try to get the funeral or the family as involved as possible. But there again, there are a lot of folks that are like, we don't want to be involved at all. So, any other questions about green burials? Yes. Oh, hold on. Yep. You're going to get your steps in today.
I'm very interested in the green
Yeah,
burial,
yeah.
but I also have 2 hip replacements.
Okay.
So the titanium hips will not disintegrate.
They won't, but you'll be all right. I promise.
So
Yeah, there's
So
no
they
issue.
still be
Yes,
there.
the hips will still be there, but, and from now, when they have archaeologists going through, they're gonna say, this woman was half bionic. So no, you'll be just fine, I promise. There's no issue at all. You know, I do have a lot of folks will come into the funeral home and they'll have an idea of what they want to do because of something that they maybe have seen or something they have heard of. There are a few things that I'm gonna point out here that are concepts. Okay, so we're talking about green burials right now. This is actually a casket, but it's made of mushroom. I know, right? They line it, looks like with moss, and the person is taken out to a field and placed in this casket, and it's supposed to disintegrate. Okay, now, while that sounds like a good idea, sometimes, I'm hoping I'm not going to hit the wrong thing here. Oh, there we go. Sometimes you have to think of things in a realistic sense. First of all, how much acreage are we talking about here? You're not going to get Lawrence cemeteries to just allow you to place a casket on top of the grave space. So you're going to have a substantial amount of field or open area in order to do something like that. Second, you'll also need to worry about you know, animals or anything like that. Maybe you don't need to worry about animals with something like that. This is one of those things that's a concept. Much like, has anyone heard of the body pod? Anyone? Okay. So this is what is called a body pod. It is a concept that the egg-shaped container down here at the bottom, when the person passes, they are placed in this egg-shaped container, taken out to the cemetery and placed in the ground. And what happens is a tree will grow out of that pod. While it's a very wonderful concept, it is what I just said, a concept. So the funeral director in me is like, wow, that's something awesome. The funeral director also in me is like, how in the world would I get an egg-shaped container that has a 200+ pound person in it out to the cemetery without it rolling around in the back of the vehicle? Or how do I logistically get the person into the grave space in this large egg-shaped container? So what we do, I had someone come in and say, my loved one wants this. This is exactly what they want, and this is how we're going to do it. And I said, well, it's truly a concept. And once I started explaining the logistics of getting that person from A to B, they said, okay, what do we do? So in this instance, what we did was we got a biodegradable container, went out to the grave space out in the green section and buried the person. And then you can contact the city of Lawrence, and they have a list of different trees that you can actually plant in that person's grave space. So the person that wanted this got something similar to it because it, like I said, it's just a concept. So there are a lot of concepts out there. Whether or not we can accommodate them, it varies per state and what we're equipped to take care of as well. One other thing that I wanted to show you, this is a new concept that's going on over in California. It was placed into law saying that it was acceptable as of 2027, I believe, maybe. Oh. I think I ruined it, sorry.
Let's see if I can help. Just want to open it up, right?
Yep.
This one?
Yep. Oh, there you go. Is the man with the magic touch. That's wonderful. Okay. All right. So this is a new concept out in California. It's called composting. Okay. Each of these little containers is lined with wood chips and different other organics, and the person is placed on this bed of organics, placed inside this containment facility. After a certain amount of time, I think it's 50 or 60 days, the person has become what's known as compost, and they will take out the entire entity, process everything and give it back to the family so you can spread the remains in a garden or anything like that. Now, this is not illegal, or this is not legal in any other state other than California as of 2027. But like I said, it's still just a concept that they will, I'm sure, figure out what needs to be done in order to get things taken care of. But still kind of a neat idea. Here I am doing it. No, don't you dare. Don't you touch it. There we go. This is also another concept, the same concept. And as you can see here, on the bottom there, they have the organics that this is what they place the person on. They slide the person in the container, and then after a certain amount of days, they decompose and are left with organics that they can put in gardens and different areas, which is a wonderful idea if you're into that. Yeah. Questions about any of that so far? Yes. Oh, goodness. Okay. That was too quick. I don't like the promptness of that.
On
yes.
the composting options, is
yes.
there heat involved to accelerate that process?
N-
Or is it just
It-
chemicals
It's,
and?
it's all organic. So
Okay.
I don't know that they use any heat or anything like that. I think the organics that they put underneath the person and the way that the container is designed to kind of move and oscillate, help make that process happen. So, yep, yes.
Can you speak to green cremation options?
Green cremation options. Well, you're talking about hydro cremation. Yes. So that's actually, that's a very new idea as well. Very similar to the way we cremate now, except you use chemical and water, basically. So right now we use natural gas at our funeral home. Depending on your crematory will determine what type of crematory, or what you use in order to get things taken care of. I don't know that there are very many hydro crematories around, because I don't think that Kansas is quite there yet. I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't hold that against me. I did have a person that I was working with, their loved one passed over in Arizona, and the funeral home I contacted down there had a hydro crematory. And I had all sorts of questions. And so I was asking left and right, what do you do? What do you do? Not to be too barbaric or anything, but if you think about a kind of like a pressure cooker, that's kind of what you're looking at with no added heat or anything like that. It's more of a chemical cremation, if that makes sense. There's a long cylinder that contains everything, and then after several hours, you're left with the cremated remains. So much like with our crematory, and I can kind of show you a little bit about what's going on. Hopefully this doesn't upset anyone, but I just want to kind of show you, this is one of the things, this is what our crematory looks like. We cremate at 1600 degrees. There's a heat up and a cool down period. But the actual cremation takes about 3 hours. And what happens is inside this large area here, that's where we place the person. It looks a lot like a pottery kiln. It heats up with natural gas. We cremate at 1600 degrees, 3 hours. Then after everything's finished, you're still left with with carbon. So you still have bone, it's still intact, and you're able to identify that bone. It's very brittle, but you're still able to identify it. So what we do is we clean out the entire crematory. Everything falls into the basin down at the bottom, and then we take everything to a cooling station, where at that point we would take out the hips and the knees and anything that's synthetic. And then we would pulverize everything or process everything. So when we return the cremated remains to the family, you're left with nothing that's recognizable. It's basically the consistency of kitty litter. It's not the same thing as kitty litter. It's just the consistency of kitty litter. So, but yeah, that's how our crematory works. And the same thing would happen with the hydro cremation. You'd be left with those bones that still have to be processed before they're returned to the family. I did have a family not too long ago, their loved one passed in Mexico, and they did not have or utilize a processing station. So when the family came back to the United States, they said, oh my gosh, we opened up the cremains and there's a whole bunch of bones in there. Well, that's it. The cremation took place, but they don't do the processing down where you did the cremation. So we helped the family out and got the cremation processed and helped them put it in the urn that they wanted. So each place is a little bit different. So and that kind of brings me back to the whole casket and coffin thing. Who here wants to answer my question here? You get bonus points. They're not going to amount for anything, but what is the difference between a casket and a coffin? Does anyone know? There's no wrong answers. Actually, there are, but I hope no one judges anyone here. Go ahead.
And one, is it?
No. You're getting there though. Nope. Close. No, that's not close at all. Sorry. No, price has nothing to do with it. You can have a really expensive coffin and a really expensive casket. Anyone else? Yes.
That's the will.
The last will?
Yeah.
Nope, nope.
I mean, do we need the last will?
Oh,
to
do,
show-
yeah, I could talk about the last will. That's not a problem at all.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not an issue at all. I'll talk to you about that in just a few moments. Go ahead. One line to not line? Not necessarily, not necessarily. Oh, okay, okay. All right, I'm gonna give it away. You ready?
Nothing.
It's the shape. It is the shape. So this is a casket. This is actually the Sterling casket. This is one of my favorite caskets that we sell. This is a brushed casket, meaning it's dark at the top and it fades into a platinum finish. This, however, is a coffin. And maybe, there we go. So as you can see, a coffin is arthropodial in shape, meaning it's wider at the shoulders and narrow at the feet. So a coffin is what Dracula would sleep in. Think about that. Actually, coffins are actually regional. So different regions have different customs, just like green burials and whatnot. I mean, there are different areas are going to have all sorts of different concepts and different things that they do different. The coffin here, we can order those. We most definitely could. Do we have folks that come in and want them? We do have folks that come in and ask for a coffin. And when I start bringing up coffin pictures, they're like, no, that's shaped funny. I don't want that. I want this. And that's when I start bringing up, okay, the difference between a casket and a coffin. So caskets are what we use locally for the most part. Like I said earlier, we do have several natural selections at the funeral home. This, even though it's as 100% natural as you can get, is still technically a casket because of its shape. Like I said, at the funeral home, and I don't have a picture of it, I wish I did. We do have seaweed coffins, which, like I said, are wider at the shoulder and narrow at the feet. And we use those for green burials as well. They make them out of all sorts of different things like bamboo and so on and so forth. So this here, every time I
I
have
have a
visit-
question.
Yes.
For cremation, do you still have to have a coffin?
You don't have to have a coffin or a casket for a cremation. However, we have to have something. So meaning the person has to be placed in something in order to be placed into the crematory. So at our funeral home, we use what's called an alternative container. So what we would do is once we bring the person back to the funeral home, we know that they are cremation. We'll go ahead and place them in this alternative container. It's industrial strength cardboard, which has a lot more to it than what just a cardboard box would have. So it's got particle board for stability and it's lined in plastic. It's designed to hold the person until we place them into the crematory. Like I said, we have to have something to get the person into the crematory. So we use an alternative container. Now, that being said, we do have several families that we work with that want to use their own alternative container, which is perfectly fine. You can build whatever you'd like and we can place it into the crematory as long as it is 99% biodegradable. It doesn't have to be 100%, but you know, I mean, with screws and whatnot, but yeah, as long as it's 99% biodegradable, we can cremate it in the crematory. This one here, this casket here is called our Nahum Pine. And it is as 100% biodegradable as you can get. There is zero metal involved with this casket. It is made with wood dowels and glue. And it's pretty neat when we get to use them because the families are usually involved with placing the person into the casket and they ask questions about, oh my gosh, what about this? What about that? There's always an uncle, and I say uncle, sometimes it's an aunt at a visitation that says, just throw me in a pine box. I'm not worth it. Just do whatever. And I usually look at them and I say, come here, come here. They'll say, me? Yes, come here, come here. And I'll pull up this picture And I'll say, this is as pine box as you can get. And they'll look at it and they'll say, well, what's the inside look like? I'm like, well, the inside looks just like the outside, except we can get a little pillow for the inside. And they usually look at it and they say, well, I want something a little nicer than that. So then they'll start talking about what they truly want. So more often than not, we have folks that are like, oh, don't make a big fuss out of me, just do this. And, like my mother, she said, just don't make a big fuss, just cremate me and have a party. Well, that party is what we need to do. The living need something. And by that, what I mean, so my grandmother tells me a story about her sister who comes over to her house every day. Every day they drink coffee, they share stories, and then lunchtime they go about their own separate ways and they do what they need to do. And her sister was always one that said, oh, don't worry, don't make a big fuss out of me. When I pass, just cremate me, don't do anything. Well, they would do this for years. They'd have breakfast and then turn around, go off and go about their day. To this day, my grandmother still thinks that her sister's going to walk in the back door at any moment because she never got to see her after she passed. She died, was cremated immediately, and they never had a service. So, I'm a firm believer in viewing the body before cremation takes place. Now, if that happens at the hospital, the nursing home, or at the house, that's what I'm talking about. Viewing the person helps the person start to realize how real the situation is. So while you say, don't do anything for me, you still need something, if that makes sense.
Can I,
Yes.
I have a quick
Yes,
question,
please.
and this might be a little sidebar.
Go ahead.
What's the process if you want to donate your body for medical research, like to KU?
Very good. Good question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I see I'm running over on my time. I'm so sorry. Yep. So we do donations with the University of Kansas. And what you can do is there is a form you fill out before you pass. It has to be before you pass because it makes it a lot easier that way. But it's bequeathing your body to the University of Kansas. And basically what that is you're signing up for up to a 2-year study. And what would happen is when the person passes, we go out, we pick up the person, bring them back to the funeral home, and we will assess the situation and find out whether or not they're a candidate for the donation program. And what then would happen is we'd use our cooling unit until KU is ready, and then we would take the person over to KU and they would do the preservation. And then once the study is over with, they would cremate the person and send them back to either the funeral home or to the family. So, okay, that's one of those good questions. When you assess the body, what are you looking for? Okay, each person dies a little bit differently. Okay, so it's our job to figure out what can and can't happen with them as far as KU is concerned. So if the person passes and they have kidney failure and they have a substantial amount of edema, so their legs swell up, that's one of those factors that's going to stop them from going over and being preserved over at KU, because the embalming fluid won't work correctly to preserve them because they have so much pent up water inside their system. If they're missing a limb, for instance, that's another thing that would make them not able to go to KU as well. But there's several things like that. If they're extremely large, like myself, then they're probably not going to allow. They want someone around the 200 or less as far as size-wise is concerned. So, but yeah, hopefully that, not at all. They do not care as far as sex is concerned. And I've had some folks that will go in, you're signing up for up to 2 years. I've had some families get the cremation back in 6 months, and I've had others that last up to the 2 years exactly. And the families that go into that need to know that if you're donating your body to science, then they need to know that you may be gone for a couple years and then they'll be returned at that moment. But yeah, go ahead.
How long can you be kept in the cooling unit?
Well, as far as we're concerned, before they go to KU or anytime. So we do work with a lot of families that maybe want to view the body before cremation takes place. And each person's a little bit different. If we know kind of the situation that's going on, we can do a few things to hopefully prevent any bad things from happening. But some folks will be viewable a week later. Some folks will be only viewable the next few days. It really depends on the manner of death. And I'm saying that, like, let's say it's the middle of summer and you're not found until later on, then obviously that's going to run some issues as far as the, viewing process and whatnot. So, yes, go ahead.
How involved are you in a situation where somebody's giving organ donation, but they haven't died yet?
Okay, so we are actually very involved with that. For the most part, we're called constantly when the death occurs. And they'll say this person is a donor, and we'll call you once everything's finished. Midwest Transplant is the local donation facility. And what happens is when the person passes, let's say it's at the hospital, the nurse will ask them, is this person a donor? Are you okay with them being a donor? So in that essence, the Midwest would come out, pick the person up, take them back to their facility, harvest, and then call us when they're ready. And then we would go pick up and do what we need to do. Go ahead.
So I'm a physician. I used to
Yes.
be involved
Yes,
in organ donation where we kept the patient alive right until the moment that
that's
their
correct.
organs were harvested.
When the person passes, it's a little different. We're very time sensitive. So what will happen is once they pass, they'll be sent over, and as time goes on, that list of what they're eligible to donate kind of dwindles. Oftentimes when let's say a person passed from heart issues or something like that, they're not going to want the heart to harvest, but they will want skin, long bones, other things like that. So they look at all those different variables, and much like KU, when we look through and assess the situation, a lot of physicians will do the same thing. Midwest Transplant's going to go through the list and find out what you passed from, what's going on, and then that'll determine what they choose to harvest as far as that's concerned.
Just
Hold on just one
a
second.
little addition to the donating your body. I know how important it is for people to the family. What they do, and there's a video on it, is they have a beautiful ceremony, and all of the students from that particular class walk in with candles, walk out, take a flower, and give it to the people, the family. They also do a little speech. So it's a very nice,
That's awesome.
there's something.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's
The other,
fantastic.
the other thing, since we've looked into it and we've worked with Todd on this, because my wife's donating her body to science, is in many states, my son's doing it in Maryland. It's free. They pick it up. They take anybody. It's done. Kansas is significantly different. So you have to understand that it is your responsibility to fund the transportation from wherever the death occurs to them. So we have made arrangements to pay for it. If it gets there and the body is rejected, which is why they do the survey,
Right.
but if it's still rejected for whatever reason, obviously if you get hit by a truck, they're not going to take it. They send it back. You're responsible to pay for that transportation, and then you have to pay for Plan B of disposing your body. So in Kansas, it's a little more complicated, probably more expensive. If you want to do this and want to go move to Maryland, it's totally free. The university takes it, and they'll take everybody, and they'll dispose of it, whatever, if they can't use it.
Yep.
So, pick your state if you're going to do the donate to science, just from personal experience. But we were fortunate enough to look all that up, work with them, and
Yep.
figure it out so we knew what we would be facing, and between the time that the body is being taken and they're going to reject it, I'm declaring bankruptcy, so whatever. All right, I'm sorry.
Another question back here?
Yes.
Yes, we had a family member pass who didn't like the idea of embalming,
Okay.
but we needed to get them across state lines to Indiana for burial, and I guess state requirements are you must be involved in embalmed if you are going to be flown anywhere across state lines.
That is correct.
Is it allowed for the family to transport their loved one a la Little Miss Sunshine?
So yes and no. Yes and no. So this is one of those questions that I love because it's different. So in the funeral industry, we actually have a different type of insurance that's involved. And you wouldn't think that we would need additional insurance when we're just transporting someone that's passed, but we do. You have to have particular type of insurance. Now, that being said, oftentimes when we're sitting down doing arrangements with a family, that's one of the questions I have. What was your dad into? What, if he was a farmer, what was his favorite truck? What was his favorite tractor? Certain things like that, because oftentimes they will have something that we can use in the service to make it more about them. So yes, you can transport a body from one place to another. However, the embalming thing does have to take place if you're going over state lines. If not, you can just transport and go from there. There are other state issues as well. Like for instance, let's say I'm going to Missouri to do a burial. I think Missouri, you have to have a licensed funeral director from Missouri present at the graveside service. So we have to contact a funeral home and get that taken care of. So it's very simple, but there are still rules and regulations as far as that's concerned. I did have one family that their loved one passed in Colorado. And they said, well, your charge to get them here is going to be this much. And I said, yes, their flight to get them here would be that much. And they said, well, we have to go get their vehicle. Can we just bring them with us? And I said, well, let me find out. So I contacted who I needed to contact. And yes, in fact, they wound up transporting their loved one back to the funeral home. Now, I did ask them, I said, do not open anything. Don't mess with the person until you get them back to the funeral home, because I don't know what to expect. And they did that just the same. When they got back, they helped me unload the casket. And we were there to open up everything, and they were dressed and ready. I mean, it was a neat experience, but they were able to not have that cost because they were already going to make that trip anyway. Yes. Okay.
So I'm a veteran. If I had
Okay.
some desire to be buried in a national cemetery, how much pre-planning is that? What does that sort of look like?
So one thing that you'll need to think about is you'll need to, much like what we've talked about today, get a funeral home involved. If you want less questions to be answered by your family, you can go in and talk to a funeral home and get everything situated. Because of your service, thank you, by the way. Because of your service, you're guaranteed a flag. You're guaranteed a headstone at a national. We can get the National Cemetery will provide the plot, opening and closing. We can get honors, the honor guard to come out and do a rifle volley as well. There's several things that they will provide. However, it really depends on what you're choosing. If you're going the cremation route, we still have to do all the paperwork in order to do the cremation. If you're doing the embalming route, while they're going to provide the vault and opening and closing, you'll still have to pay for the casket and all the services that are involved with as far as that's concerned. So it really just depends on what you're choosing to do as far as your disposition, and we can kind of run with that. So think about what you want. Think about what you want and how you want to go about it, and then bring those ideas into a funeral home, and then we can sit down and hash those out for sure. Yes.
I just wanted to mention, and I may have mentioned this at one of the last events, that there is an insurance card I carry called Emergency Assistance Plus.
Okay.
And if you don't know about it, they will ship your body back or bring you home if you are ill.
No kidding. Wow.
So it's worth, to me, it might be something you want to explore.
I'm going to take a picture of that before you leave, if that's okay. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
When someone dies at home, either
Mm-hmm.
expected or unexpected, what has to happen before you can come out and haul the body off?
Okay, so it really depends on what's going on. If the person's not on hospice care or anything like that, let's say they're 99 years old and never in hospice care, 911. You call 911 immediately. They have to have someone come out and pronounce the death. Okay, so if they're on hospice care, then you have to call the hospice that's involved. And then that nurse will come out and pronounce the death. Okay, so anytime it's an unattended death, you have to have someone come out and pronounce the death before the funeral home's involved. Okay, so most of the time it's the hospice is involved, you know, it's not, it was more expected than unexpected. But anytime there's an unattended death, the first thing to do is call 911. So unless they're on hospice care, like I say, then you call
Okay,
the
I'm
hospice.
afraid we're gonna have to call it because of time. However, Todd has generously said he would stay if you have some personal questions or some specific questions to answer them, but I want to respect everybody's schedule today. So we're going to have to call the actual thing, and I'm not even sure if somebody else is using the room soon. I didn't look, but
No, I was actually going to give you fair warning when you walk out. We do during weekdays from 11 to 12, we have free lunches for kids. It's normally in this room, but they're out in the lobby. So when you step out the doors, there's going to be a whole lot of kids and school lunches. So just wanted to kind of not surprise you there.
don't step on the kids, please.
Yeah.
What,
Uh,
I just need to say one more thing before you folks go, and this is something that a lot of folks don't understand and don't truly grasp. The durable power of attorney over medical has the right to final disposition. Okay? So if you go out, everybody, you guys have talked about DPOAs and all of that.
Yeah.
So power of attorney over medical has the right to final disposition. So they're the ones that call the shots at the funeral home. So if your power of attorney over medical isn't the one that's going to fulfill your requirements or what you want, just know they have the final say at the funeral home. So I'm just letting you know, I want to give you that heads up. Oftentimes we have two kids, our power of attorney, one's finance and one's medical, and they're upset about the death. And so one will say, Mom wants this. And the other one will say, well, how are you going to pay for that? I'm power of attorney over finances. And so we have to find a common ground. So just know when you choose your power of attorney over medical, that's the one that calls the shots at the funeral home. So hopefully I've answered some questions, and I'll stick around if anyone else has any other questions.
Okay,
So-
I want to thank Todd. I thought this was
Thank you,
really
No.
informative.
Thank you.
And I'm really proud of you guys. You came up with some of the greatest, weirdest, craziest questions I've heard, but I think they were all important, and I think we learned a lot. So thanks again, Todd.
Thank you.
He'll stay around for a few minutes as we get cleaned up, so.
You bet. Thank you.